from a financial perspective, there have been analyses done that show that planting a tree in a city, like I think this was done in New York City, where for every dollar invested into a tree, there was $5 of return because of it being something that provides shade to the city. It helps with stormwater management, and I'm forgetting the word, ingests CO2, right? It's carbon sequestration. Like there's so many benefits on a financial level as well for our cities and what we're doing there if we think about it.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Active Towns channel. My name is John Simmerman, and that is Rachel Leonardo with Studio Leonardo on YouTube, and also with Strong Towns. She is the new video producer there for the Strong Towns organization. She resides in Pamplona, Spain. And before we dive into this delightful conversation with Rachel, I just need to say, if you are enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. It's easy to do. Just navigate over to activetowns.org, click on the support tab at the top of the page. Every little bit helps a great deal and helps bring this content to you every week. So again, thank you so much. Let's get right to it now with Rachel. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me on the Active Towns podcast.
No, thank you for having me and inviting me on. It's been an honor to be here. I'm super excited to get to talk to you and nerd out about all this stuff.
Yeah, we are going to nerd out on all this good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you for a second. I'll give you the floor to introduce yourself. So who the heck is Rachel?
Yeah, that's a great question. Who is Rachel? You know, I studied architecture and in college, and then currently live in Spain. So there's quite a big jump there. But I've always had a passion for the built environment and how a singular building can impact the way that we live. And that was what led me to taking those studies into like higher education. And I've always also had a yearning to live abroad and to better understand how our environment actually impacts the way that we live, and experience it for myself, living in an environment that I had never previously been exposed to. And having come out here and with the background that I had, it was difficult to find work. And that ultimately led me to YouTube, which has since allowed me to develop a very awesome skill set and get to connect with a lot of these incredible creators in the urbanist space and active, what's the word I'm looking for? Activism and tactical urbanism space, how we can create better cities. And that's also ultimately has what led me to work with Strong Towns as well. And I'm currently working with them to create short and long form video content to continue to promote this message that, hey, it's not just these developers and planners that can have an impact on their cities, but you can as well. And that has been probably the best thing that has happened to me in my journey so far. It's not one that I would have predicted.
Yeah, fantastic. So now, where'd you grow up? Were you there in Spain, or were you here in the United States?
Yeah, I was in the U.S. I grew up just outside of the D.C. area. And, you know, it was a good life. And I was very privileged to live in the way that, grow up in the way that I did. But, you know, cars were always in the picture, as is kind of the typical answer I always hear from people in the United States who grew up around my generation, a couple years older and younger as well. And I had my first experience abroad when I was 16. And at that time, I don't think I fully understood the difference between the lifestyle that I had in the US versus there. It is mostly just this shock of like, wow, the newspapers are in a totally different language, versus an understanding of how the built environment has an impact on what you're doing in your day-to-day life. But I got a second opportunity to live in Germany in college. Again, very grateful for that opportunity. And it was really then, after having studied a lot of architecture and having influences in architecture school from one of my favorite mentors, and still beloved to this day, we connect all the time. He was very interested in the built environment and the Strong Towns movement, and really introduced me to these ideas of, hey, it's not just a building that can impact the way that people use and live in space, but the urban fabric itself has a big impact on how we live and how we design it, even more so. And that's what kind of created this little nagging at myself, I guess, to want to come out here and experience it for myself. So I've been out here for 3 years. I've loved it so far. And yeah, I figured why not? While I don't have too many responsibilities, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, yeah. So you're in Pamplona, and we'll talk a little bit more about that setting and all of that. But I just want to follow up. Where in Germany were you?
Yeah, I was in a little town called Braunschweig or Brunswick. So it was about, if I'm remembering the tram and the train times correctly. I think it's an hour and a half south of Hamburg.
Okay.
Very cute, quaint little town, super walkable. The tram systems there were incredible. I mean, I could travel around the whole country without a car very easily, given the fact that, as a student, I had a card that allowed me to travel through the province that I was living in for free, essentially. And then prices to get from the edge of that province into other parts of the country, like Berlin, or even then outside of the country, were just very affordable and accessible at the time. So, that freedom of movement was such a life-changing mind shift for me, and just terms of how we can create spaces that are less dependent just on a car. And it's not that there weren't cars, and it's not that I think personally that cars are the enemy of all in the world right now. It's just that there were more options. And as somebody who was only there for a very short period of time, where it wouldn't have been convenient to buy a car, get a European license to drive around there, it was so much more easy and liberating for me to be able to meet up with friends or go and experience other parts of Europe, which is kind of the point when you're out there, in a way that felt like I wasn't being held back, or I didn't have to put over a ton of money to get insurance for a car or to rent a car in places that I was unfamiliar with. With public transit, I could have a little card, which was probably the most difficult thing to get, because you're speaking in another language, or at least trying to. It's very broken. But after that, it's really easy, versus trying to rent a car in another country, and maybe those people are speaking a broken English, or I'm speaking broken German, which happened a lot. It's just more difficult. And I think that public transit, there's more to it than just the fact that it's a convenient option. It's also, it's more affordable. And I think it can be very, very liberating, especially if you're traveling in places that are unfamiliar to you. I find that those people are often very open to even discussing where you're going and how to get there. They're very helpful.
Yeah. And I love that you kind of channeled, one of my core tenets of the Active Towns movement, which is this is about mobility choice, having options. And that's very much the zeitgeist there in Germany, because, other than maybe a handful of cities in Germany, they're not really all that, quote unquote, bike oriented and active mobility oriented, to the point where you'd say, oh yeah, no, that's like Utrecht in the Netherlands. It's like, no, it's not like that. But oftentimes there is that overlay and expectation that there's going to be mobility choice. And later, in the coming weeks, I'll be actually profiling both Freiburg down in the Black Forest region. I was able to meet up with Ashton from the Type Ashton channel on YouTube, and so she took me out in Freiburg, and we did a little on-bike interview there. And then the next day, I was in Munich to meet up with the city staff members that were in charge with building out the bicycle network there in Munich. And so so stay tuned, fans. We're going to have some more content from Germany coming up here real soon. But I have a quick follow-up question from a language perspective, because you mentioned that, the challenges with language and all that. Are you multilingual? I mean, I'm assuming you know Spanish.
Yeah, I do. I speak Spanish fluently. I'm playing around with potentially making content, like personally, for that. I think that there's a huge untapped potential for this movement and urbanism to speak to people in their language and meet them where they're at. And, we have a ton of content in English, and I don't see that as much in other languages. Spanish is the only one I will caveat. If Spanish is the only language I speak fluently, German is very broken. And I'm currently working on Italian. And a lot of that comes from just me having a big interest in communicating with people. I find humanity to be very fascinating. And I think to be able to speak in another language, you kind of get a different mindset for how people approach problems. And I think you also gain a certain level of trust with someone when you put in the level of effort to try and learn their language. And then the more selfish side of me is that is quite maybe a more selfish reason, but the other selfish reason is just ethnically wise. My family's from Austria and Italy, as well as Colombia. So I have this mix, and I've always been obsessed with this idea of trying to figure out how to think in the way that my great-grandparents would thought and probably were expressing themselves, to maybe in a lost effort to try and connect with them better. But those are some of the motivators for me to learn languages.
Fascinating, fascinating. Well, I'm going to pop on over here to this landing page. This landing page was when I interviewed Mike Pasternak, the previous video champion there at Strong Towns. And that's how I first learned about you, because he was so stoked about your channel and the content that you were creating. And he was like, "Oh man, you got to follow up with Rachel." And I did. I reached out to you, and this has been months in the making, because when I first reached out to you and I first scheduled this recording session, Mike was still working at Strong Towns, and you were still primarily focused on your own YouTube channel and doing some other things. Talk a little bit about that journey too, because in fact, I'm going to pull up your channel here for a minute, and but I'll let you kick it off. Talk a little bit about that YouTube journey. You mentioned it a little bit in passing there, but then you really sort of leaned into it and started producing some content, and then we'll talk about that transition over to helping Strong Towns out.
Definitely, yeah. The YouTube journey was definitely a fun one. I guess to start out, I've always been interested in video, so that's what led me to wanting to make the channel, alongside having my deep interest in architecture. And I'm a chatty person, and I would always talk about this stuff with my friends, whether we'd be walking around in a city, and I'd be like, "Look at these bricks. The way that these are formed, like this is more structural versus this one is just like a wrapping paper." And I had this passion for teaching and about a subject that I'm super interested in, but I know can be quite nerdy. And I wanted to use some of the skills that I learned in school with animation and design to create this channel. And also just to hone in on that skill and improve. And it's been really a very fruitful journey to not only explore and get to know Pamplona better, which is two of the videos that you're seeing on the screen there, but also to connect with a couple of people who are very passionate about like where they live. The recent one that I posted was a collaboration I did with a cinematographer based in Austin, Texas. And if it weren't for him, I don't think I would have been able to tell that story. And we were able to also reconnect with Rethink 35, which was great. And by doing this, I really saw the power of how social media can connect us, and people who are both like-minded and also those who are critical. And I felt that this was a great way to have a landing page for constructive conversation. And one of my subscribers very, very early on pointed me to Strong Towns, which is what led me to rediscovering them, because I knew about them in college, but again, at that time, I wasn't as active in this space. And I don't think at that point they were making YouTube content like that Mike was producing. And shout out to Mike. He's awesome. He was one of my first connections with Strong Towns and put me in contact with Sierra and Sheena and some other members of the team to start making their short form content as a way to kind of experiment and see if we could work together. And I was really content with that. I was over the moon to even be considered to be featured on their channel, and that they were pleased with the content that I was making. And I put a lot of effort into trying to show them my best foot forward in terms of how we can make this content, not even content, these topics more interesting for the person who maybe kind of interested in what we're talking about, but aren't as nerdy as you and I are on a daily basis, like begging to have these kinds of conversations, right? And I think that adding these visuals and making them fun was a big part of me just expressing probably what I would have liked to have seen as a young person just starting out college or in high school, that makes this world seem so much more fun, because it is, right? Like, this is human, or like adult-sized Legos is the city and is our towns, and the way that we're moving and building these spaces is so influential. So I may be rambling, but to get back to Strong Towns, I from this content, I think that's what ended up leading me to them. And after doing some of the short form, I got an email from Sheena, one of the directors at the team, and she offered me a position for the long form, creating more long form and creating more regularly with the team. And so I've started about 3 months ago, and it's been fantastic ever since.
Yeah. And I think it's a fascinating journey. And I do want to dive a little bit deeper into that video that you did on Austin, because that's where I live. And so I was like stoked that I saw that one pop up. But I do want to pop on over here to the actual Strong Towns YouTube channel. And I found it very interesting today as I was preparing for this conversation with you, to see two things. One is to see this video here that was released just 10 days ago and already has 80,000, almost 90,000 views in 10 days, which in our sort of nerdy kind of world, unless your name is Jason Slaughter and you have the Not Just Bikes channel, I mean, that's really, really impressive. And in fact, compared to the previous video at 5 months prior, where Mike had produced this wonderful video about why are we so lonely, and you had a cameo in. And so you were in that video, and that whole loneliness thing you very much have a connection with, because a good portion of the content on your channel talks a little bit about that, about the zeitgeist of why are we so lonely, and what's the influence of both the built environment and cars and screen time, looking at cell phones all the time. So that's very, very complicated, but it's very, very nuanced and fun. And so I love that video. Love that you had the cameo in, and then lo and behold, boom, here we are. But I don't want to focus in on any of that. I mean, that's all super, super cool. And I want people to click on these and watch them if they haven't already done so. I want to focus on something that you mentioned earlier, which is short form. And so I want to go over the short form stuff here for Strong Towns. 1.3 million views on this one. That's freaking awesome. And it is awesome because if you look at it, it's an outlier. The next closest short form video, and again, YouTube Shorts, at the time, they were just 60 seconds long. YouTube is working on making them 3 minutes long. But yeah, you packaged a lot into 60 seconds, and then you channeled Edward and Michelle's hometown of there in West Virginia on this. Yes, I recognize that. I've known them for over a decade too. Talk a little bit about the fact that you caught on something here, and this little video had 1.3 million views.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is maybe more to do with the strategies and visuals than the topic or the content itself, but from our understanding and something that we continue to try and build towards is creating visuals that people can latch onto. And I think Evan at Streetcraft does this really well, finding just like how we have to scale our built environment to people, and we have to be very contextual about what that scale looks like, depending on how many people are moving through that space throughout a day, how many people live in that area. We also, in short form and in long form, need to be conscientious of what's going to attract somebody to make them understand these concepts at a deeper level. And I think the opening of this short, which is not actually my face like being confused, which is sometimes very often as I do research and continue to get deep into this stuff, it's a visual of us coming into the street and seeing a group of homes in a suburban development. I think the reason that the scaling of that worked, and then the visuals that we have here with the animation just well reflected the concept in a way that we are trying again to get to in other videos, so that it, this transition again between the road and into the street view and showing some B-roll of what it is to cross the street, that we can better explain the concept of what is optical narrowing through these small concepts and kind of making changes. But, I've tried to add my personality in here as well, where, we're making different camera cuts and I'm a little bit faster paced and jumpy. I think those all are things that contributed to its success, because more so than just retention, which is obviously a topic and a buzzword on YouTube, it's just about constantly delivering on making content that is digestible and explainable. And there's something that struck a nerve with people, I think, in that video to make them feel like they could better digest and understand the concept of optical narrowing, and that it didn't have to be, or it doesn't have to be, a fully fledged, tree-lined street with big flower pots that help to create more of this narrowing feeling and cars going down it slowly. But street parking can, and a couple of lines can do a lot, right? To make that environment feel safer as a first step, or depending on if that is like necessary at this moment in time, then that is a good solution, right? And I think ultimately that's what we're trying to work for is stepped solutions over time. I don't think it needs to look perfect, but we just need to be able to learn from what we're doing in our built environment. And the same thing goes with the short form. And that's kind of what you're seeing here is this iterative process and testing and seeing if certain ideas resonate more with people, and getting more of our team members to do short form too. You'll see in the bottom right corner there, that's Asha, one of our team members, super talented, but she's also crushing short form. She's doing a great job. We love to see it.
Yeah, and of course we've got a familiar face in John there as well. He was recently on the channel, and we profiled his work, and really, and he's running for city council out there in Chattanooga, which is fantastic. But he's really crushing it also on TikTok, and he's got his whole following over there. And it sounds like you may, I'm making an assumption here, are you kind of shifting a little bit more over to really trying to step into Mike's shoes a little bit and focus on that Strong Towns long form content. I know Chuck is doing his sort of man on the street, talking into the camera, on his little channel, which is fantastic. I love seeing him walking around Brainerd and all of that. So is that the from a corporate strategy perspective, you're really trying to focus in on producing that high quality, well produced, long form content for the channel?
Yeah, well, we're trying to do both, I think, is the short and easy answer. The end of the day, we're trying to spread this message to people further, and short form is a really low lift in comparison to long form way of doing that, and cumulatively get in front of more people to share this message in a faster way on a day-to-day basis versus long forms where we get more permission to dive deeper into certain topics. And Strongtown's strategy moving forward is to try and incorporate new and different perspectives on the channel as well. So I won't be the only face that's featured on the Strongtown's long form content, but we'll have other freelance people who are sending pitches in, and those are getting handled through our systems to develop into Strongtown's worthy long form to get different perspectives from people all over the place, because this is very contextual. The way that we address these problems is going to be very much dependent on where you live and who's in local government. How much do they know about strong towns? How on board are they with strong towns or active towns ideas, right? And I'm super excited to be one of those featured faces. And then on the other side, I will also continue to work on the short form content.
Got it. Well, and I want to, kind of click on the sort this by most popular, and very, very encouraged to see that this recent video that did come out about 5 months ago, that's really honing in on the new book that Chuck and Daniel had written on the housing trap. Fantastic to see that there. Of course, the number 2 video there from 13 years ago, coming in at just under 400,000 views. That's not really fair, though, because we know that there's other versions of that video that have an equal amount. I would guess that particular animation video has well over 1 million views in total. It's just a classic. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, I'll include the link in the show notes here. You'll want to watch that. Chuck and I have talked about that video in depth because it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I hear what you're saying too, because one of the things that I love about the short form is that it gives you that opportunity to try to introduce the concepts to a whole new audience. And so a short form video, whether it's on TikTok or YouTube or embedded on social media channels, which, by the way, if you don't know, Blue Sky is just exploding right now. People are leaving X, Twitter, and over the last 3-4 days, I mean, it's just been insane to see how many people have been flocking over there. So that's just a little tip to you guys over at Strongtowns. Lean into your Blue Sky and get over there, because it's really encouraging to see the energy that's over there. But you hear what I'm saying is it's like, whether it's on Threads or Instagram or whatever the platform is, and that's kind of the weird world that I'm in, is yes, I'm producing this podcast and producing this content on YouTube, but I'm also promoting all of this content on all these different social media platforms. And before Twitter/X imploded and became a cesspool, I was very, very active there and had a good following there too. Talk a little bit about that strategy, though, of like producing that combination of the short form content to try to get out to new audiences and fresh eyes, so that we're not just all bouncing around within our echo chamber, and then also hopefully bringing people into the environment, and then maybe that's their clue to like click on one of those longer form and diving deeper into the subject.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the fact that it is low lift makes it easier for it to get out there. And short form is more susceptible to virality, I feel, in a way that the amount of time that's dedicated to it doesn't have to. You just have a greater return on investment, I guess, to put it simply. And on each platform, it's going to look different. But all of these platforms, all of their algorithms are prioritizing interest over subscriber counts or followers. And what that ultimately ends up meaning is we can reach colder audiences quicker, depending on people's interests. And if we do a good job of going back to the visuals on that one short for Strong Towns, if all of those visuals hit the mark to make the piece of content feel educational, and deliver the message in a digestible way, right? I think those are the two biggest questions that we should be asking ourselves as we take the information we know about the built environment and we are putting it online. It also is opening ourselves up to those criticisms. And I think for me, the way that I see those kinds of comments, although I do believe people can be a bit kinder on the internet, or they should be at least, that I don't see those things as necessarily negative, right? They're just expressing an opinion based off of their own perspective and the way that they've lived. And one video that's 60 seconds long, I understand isn't going to convince you of anything or change your life. But if you're seeing us frequently showing up on these different platforms and you're hearing our ideas and are open to understanding a little bit more, then it does create more breathing room for you to consume that kind of content. We create a library of content that is consistent, that you can then go back to and watch a bit more. And if you start to want to understand it at a deeper level, then there is long form to get into. And long form to me nowadays is very much trying to create content that is TV quality, right? We want people to sit down and watch this and digest it, but we want it to be fun and exciting because, I'm not the only one who was in school at one point and they put on a show that's 30 minutes long and it's kind of boring and it goes over your head. Like, how can we change that, right? That's always been my goal, is to create content that is exciting, and that's a work in progress for sure. I mean, I don't think that I'm at the level that I want to be, but that's exciting to know that I'm working towards that. So I don't know if that fully answers your question.
No, I think it does too. And in fact, I see connections between that Ranson, West Virginia, explainer video that really kind of talks about what happens when you widen, the lane and when you widen the clear zones and all of that. And the video that we're looking at here with our disaster that is I-35 that runs right through the center of Austin, Texas. And I think that it really kind of helps people better understand their built environment and the streetscape and why speeding is such an issue. And, the fact that we have taken highway designs, highway street designs, highway, roadway designs, and forced them into urban environments, which just absolutely destroy, the neighborhoods and the downtowns and the vibrancy. And I think that that's one of the tragedies that we have had. And so much of what, Chuck has talked about in terms of what a STROD is, a street road hybrid, of taking these highway designs and then forcing them in, but at the same time, having lots of meaningful destinations and driveways and mixing, it just doesn't mix. And so an easy onboarding through a 60-second video to be able to explain something, to pique somebody's interest and say, oh, okay, what's that next video? I want to learn more about this and et cetera. I'm looking, so we're looking at the Austin video here. And one of the things that I think about is I could totally see this being a Strong Towns video as well. How did it end up on your personal channel versus the Strong Towns channel?
Yeah, well, this was one of the last videos that I was producing on my own before moving over. So that's kind of how this ended up happening. But to speak a little bit more to this, I love the collaborative process. If you look through some of the older videos on my channel as well, I'm obsessed with trying to get to know other people in this space who are trying to make content, making this topic much more accessible to people online, right? And really leveraging the power of social media to reach voices who otherwise would not hear about these topics. And this was such a fun experience because I got to connect with people in Austin and better understand what's going on there, despite the fact that I have not been able to visit yet. And I really want to.
Here's Miriam right here. So
yeah, right. No, yeah. Totally. And I think that the benefit of being able to connect in this way is it's made me more excited and elongated my list of places that I want to go. And it also challenges me, at least as a creator on that side of things, to put myself in the shoes of the people who are there, and humbly to recognize that having not lived there, I probably can't reflect to the best of my ability what it's like to be there. But having access to people who do live there, who do want to share these stories, and I can be the vehicle to get, no, pun intended there, but the vehicle to make that to happen online is super cool. So for me, that's awesome, and I hope, like, just as another small thing, one of the reasons I do love social media is it is really easy to reach out, and I've found that people who are really interested in this topic and have not had any experience in it prior and come from very different walks of life have messaged me, and we've had amazing conversations offline, as well as in different interviews and stuff that you can see on YouTube, that I feel have strengthened this movement and created more diverse perspectives.
Yeah. And this is one of the videos that we were sort of alluding to earlier about social isolation. And it's also one of the other videos where you did, a collaborative effort with Flurf Design. Yeah.
Yeah,
which
no,
is
definitely.
So cool.
Yeah, no, but the social stuff is the social side of this issue is definitely what got me most interested in it. And now working with Strong Towns, I'm learning more of that financial backing. I definitely would not claim I'm an expert, but I'm diving into that as well. And I find it very interesting to see, as these pieces come together and build up on their own, how they'll start to intertwine, at least in my mind, and how I'm able to make sense of it and then express the ties between the social aspects of our design, or the social implications, I should say, of the way that we design our built environment, and the financial implications as well, and what the crossover is there. And I think that there's something interesting there that I have not fully formed a thought around. I have inklings of things at the moment, but it's exciting. I'm very obsessed with this stuff.
Well, let me ask you this, since I've been a part of this movement for so long, in knowing personally Chuck and also Joe Minicozy, who does the financial modeling, that I think has really made a huge impact on helping make it understandable. Let me just shut up and let you explain, how easy is it to kind of grasp and understand that connection between the financial side of stuff and what you have been swimming in over the last 3 or 4 years, which is, understanding, the social isolation stuff and the impact on that side of things, which is very much a psychology and wellness and, well-being sort of side of things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, the financial side, the Strong Towns approach, the message that we as an organization try to put forward is that the way that we've been building over the last 60 years, the suburban development pattern has put us in a financial deficit or debt, and we have no way of paying off the amount of infrastructure that we have based off of the amount of people that use it. The best way to think about this is in terms of ratios. For one person in a town, there could be 20,000 square feet of developed land today in 2024. And back in 1940, that number would have looked like 1,600 square feet. And that's a major difference. And I am pulling those numbers from the last video I did, but I do believe that I've tweaked them slightly. So don't quote me on that directly. But essentially the idea here is, if you now are one person and have to pay for 20,000 square feet of maintenance, that is a much higher cost, a much higher burden and risk for you to take on financially to maintain. And that is what happens at the local level, is our cities are not able to financially afford the large amounts of development that they have done over the last 60 years. And at some point through our taxes, we have to pay for that. That's very much the Strong Towns approach. And I am completely on board with that. It is something that's really opened my eyes over the last couple of months, I would even say, because it is admittedly not been my focus on my personal channel. But I do feel that it's a major support and benefactor of the social side as well. So for me, in my personal approach or coming into this, I've been interested in the social aspect more so because of the influences I've had here in Spain. The culture and the identity of each of these towns is so intertwined in different cultural festivals and fairs and markets that they have. And it's not something that's just one time a year. Like these little places, I guess they talk to each other at one point because there is something going on in every town all over this country every weekend, going from the summer into the winter, and it doesn't stop.
And let me jump in real quick and say this is that that's what I hear from my friends that live in Germany too.
Yeah,
they're like,
totally.
There's like a festival happening all the time here. So maybe it's just a European thing of like, let's get together. Let's have more festivals. And why not?
Right. Yeah. And I definitely think that is the culture around this as well, is like people, again, because they were able to grow in a way without major influences from cars or infrastructuralization of things. There's a benefit that they have today, right? There's also been suffering and growth and learnings that they have to go through to get to this point in 2024, to offer these kinds of services to people. That's not to say that they never existed, but it's just to not evade the fact that they also have hardships, right? And for me, that cultural point is there's more to the city than just the buildings, right? There's an identity there that is encapsulated by the people who live there, the things that people are proud of to live in a city. And sometimes the numbers don't get through to people. It's the emotional side that maybe gets people hooked in at first, right? Why are you proud to live in Austin, Texas? Why are you proud to live in Nicosia, Greece? There's an organization that I speak to, based in Nicosia, Cyprus. They're gonna be messaging me for that mix up. But why are they proud to be where they're from? Like what makes their place unique, right? And one of the things that I'm at least was trying to do was show that these frameworks of creating places that feel more walkable, that have local businesses around the corner that you have easy access to, that have mobility choice, create an environment that can foster more of these cultural experiences, because you're able to get together and spontaneously have these kinds of festivals, right? Like, there's a small town that's south of where I live, about an hour south, and they have a youth festival every year. And at one point, part of that youth festival was they would throw melons at the town hall. And I'm not suggesting that every place does that, but I don't know where that came from, right? But it was unique to them. And maybe there was just an excess of melon product that they had. And so that became a thing.
It's also a sense of fun and whimsy. And, you're in Pamplona there. So, of course, Pamplona has the running of the bulls. And so, every place kind of has this little thing that's there. What you were just saying, though, brought this memory or this image into my memory. And of course, this, go ahead and introduce this. What are we looking at?
Sure. Yeah. This was my thesis project for architecture school. I'm sure there's probably a lot more work that could have been done for it, but essentially I was trying to redesign a space just outside of campus at Virginia Tech. To the left there, that big gray box is the stadium seating for Lane Stadium. And anybody who has gone to Virginia Tech will know that the area next door to it is a place called Center Street, which was notorious for these big tailgates and parties, and was optimal because there were these little paths that you can also see in the drawing here that connected the stadium to this neighborhood. And when game day came around, most of this area got shut off and people were able to walk freely. But the problem is that a lot of the housing in this area, it was, some of the most expensive land in Blacksburg, and the housing is very dilapidated and also very single family. So the gray buildings you see that are still there in this more developed space were going to be existing buildings, and then the other colored buildings that you see there were suggestions as to how we could make this space better for the people of Blacksburg and offer more housing for students. As I don't know if he's the current president, but the president, Tim Stans, was trying to ramp up the amount of students coming in to create more of a Texas A&M, like a big school, right? And obviously issues with these university towns is you need more student housing, you need more affordable student housing, and it's best to try not to encroach on the local market where people from the town would live, and try and keep prices level. Obviously, those are big issues and problems that Blacksburg faces, as well as other university towns. But this was kind of an attempt, at least, to try and visualize what this space could look like by, shifting the way that the buildings were, to create little open spaces for people to meet up, to create, again, this to incentivize culture being created in these streets, and more green environments that also just felt nice to walk in. A college tailgate in a kind of rundown area in the neighborhood. You can imagine how that ends up looking after a day, especially if it's raining. And this was a way that we could just reimagine what that looked like. And for me, it was such an amazing project to be a part of, because it was my first little attempt at doing some sort of urban planning, right? Beforehand, I was told, if you design a building, then the building can be helpful to people. Virginia Tech had a great program. My colleagues as well are fantastic designers. But at the time, I had a problem with the fact, and I didn't know how to voice it, that we were told that only one building can change the lives of many people. And we didn't connect it to how that one building could also have an impact in the greater urban fabric that was being created, or greater public realm that was being created. So this was kind of a small attempt in a small town to try and do something similar. And these images that you're flashing through here are a few of the collages put together that to give the ephemeral idea of what the spaces could be.
It's so funny too, because when I think about the videos that you have produced and how many of them that you have done, out in the little public squares there in Pamplona and all of that, I look at this, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see that. This is, a couple years prior to you actually living in those types of environments. Talk a little bit about how powerful that is for you to be living in an environment where you do have that sort of informal sociability of, people coming together in that sort of space, and how that relates to and maybe helps smooth over some of the jaggedness of that loneliness. One of the topics that you talk about a lot. I would imagine that and I don't know, I don't want to assume why you were talking about this, but I can imagine that if you were out stuck in some suburban context and doing that, you would be even more challenged, or you would be in a situation where that would be personally that much more impactful. But I don't want to make any assumptions and speak for you. So talk a little bit about that relevance.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to make it kind of quick. But for me, loneliness was always a very interesting topic. I personally wouldn't say I have ever been super lonely. I mean, coming out here, of course, is a big change, and there is a huge cultural shock. And so there are definitely moments where, one, I was more focused on trying to build up my career. And I think I've only recently started to take advantage of the fact that I live in a place that makes it easier to connect with people. And I've made some great friends and have recurring activities in the evenings. And that has been awesome to see how my social life has flourished here.
2 questions for you real quick. Did you know anybody in town when you first moved there? And 2, what was the reason for that move in that city?
Sure. Yeah. So in Germany, all of my roommates were from Pamplona. And then
That's the
I
connection.
met
Okay.
my partner and my partner's out here. So that was one of the big reasons. So I do know people here, but some of them have since moved away because, yeah, they found work in different cities in Spain, and also one is in France. But and I definitely had like a social life, but it's always been through other people and never been something on my own. And so I've since branched out this year to be able to do that. And the infrastructure of this city and many cities like it. And I don't think that this is an uncommon, like you can definitely find this in the US. I have friends who live in San Diego and they take a trolley to get into different parts of the city. And they find that to be fantastic because, they can go out and have a drink and not worry about having to take a car home, right? But here, from what I've been able to live and notice is, having come from the suburbs of the DC area, is I can leave my house out my front door and I can be with my friends at a bar in 5 minutes and we can share a drink and have like deep conversations. And it also like lends itself to these group meetings, right? There's a lot of expats here. And I found this expat group and we meet regularly on Tuesdays and Fridays, right? And I'm also in a language school here learning Italian. And so those are people that I'm also connected to, and we have shared common interests, right? That I think come from partially this cultural lens, right? And the fact that in the city they do have a lot of these public works, public arts, music that comes and plays, especially in the summertime. And that also gets you introduced to different groups and associations around the city that you can become a part of, much like the way that college would have the it wasn't the career fair, but those little interest meeting or interest fairs for different events and organizations and associations that they had on campus. There's a citywide version of that here, and it's just not as deliberate. But by seeing 26 drum sets in the middle of the Plaza de Castillo, which is one of the places I feature in my videos, and they're all playing like rock music. I mean, that makes me want to go and play drums. I have no drum experience or musical experience at all, but like that's a cool community. Those are all people who share a common interest and they come together because of that. And so I have found my people through language learning, and also those who have come here as expats and share similar experience to me in that. And I'm sorry, I think I forgot the second half.
No, that's all good.
Oh, yeah.
And it also brings up, in looking at your LinkedIn page, I was like, oh, and you also did some work for Gary V there in Pamplona.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about
That's
that
correct.
and introduce Gary for people in the urbanism world. I know Gary from, his very first book he wrote, nearly 2 decades ago.
Right.
How the heck did that come together?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was looking for work and I was doing my own YouTube thing on my channel, and applied through some community posts that he had for international positions. They were looking for people to translate his content. So I was actually predominantly working for his Spanish channel, but I did end up taking closer to the end of my time with them a role that was overseeing all of our language channels. And he's been the foundational in my understanding of social media and how to digest and understand the analytics of social media and the importance of being consistent and posting and curious and also willing to try different pieces of content, right? And I mean, the rumors are very true. He's an incredible human being. His team is also incredible. They're very kind people, very hardworking people. But yeah, that I think is also the reason that connection even came about, is because of this channel. So if you have anybody who's watching who has any interest or in urbanism or in something niche, I highly encourage you to start posting. You don't have to be an expert at all or have any idea how to use video. You'll learn as you continue to do it. You're putting in the reps, as Gary says, and many others, and it leads you to some incredible opportunities. I'm 2-3 years into this, and I've been able to meet amazing people and have been able to, expand my worldview, not only in urbanism, but in other aspects as well. So I really,
Yeah.
I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah. And so you're settled in there in Pamplona, and occasionally you make your way back here to North America, I believe. In fact, I think that's the reason why we didn't connect when I was in Europe for 60 days, as you were heading back to North America. So long-term perspective, you think you're going to be settling there for some time?
Yeah, at least at the moment, I definitely I feel good here. I feel very settled. I'm finding my roots in Pamplona, and I really am also finding the little things about the city that I'm, slowly falling in love with. Right? I shouldn't say slowly, but what I'm trying to say. But I do have really strong ties to the U.S. I love the people that live there. I think that there is so much. Hard work and like ingenuity and this kind of do it yourself that we have that is it feels very unique, and maybe that's coming from my singular perspective, and as a movement that's trying to create better towns, create more active spaces, there's so much opportunity for all of us to get more involved. And so I do try to make it back to the US at least 2 times a year. Now with Strong Towns, that could be more. Things there are still developing, but
yeah. Well, I'm super excited to hear this opportunity to maybe do some translation and to do some content in Spanish as well, given the fact that you are fluent there and you have that history of especially working with Gary Vee and all of that from that perspective. I just had Jordy on the channel, and I know that you're colleagues with him as well. He's doing wonderful stuff down in Barcelona and all of that. And I've had Manu Calvo down in Seville on the channel a couple of times, and it's always wonderful connecting with him. I haven't been down to Seville recently. It was 2018 was the last time I was there, but I really look forward to meeting up with you over there one of these days soon, and also Jordy in Barcelona. I'm so intrigued by all of that. Given the context of the recent bad storms in Valencia, I have to ask, I hope you didn't get hit by a massive flooding in your region as well.
Yeah, here we're good in the north. The terrain here is very different, but it's very sad to see what has happened there. And, trying to see the positive as well. And the way that the people have come together has been awesome. It's something that they're still dealing with, very much so. People are going down and trying to help and volunteer. And there's been a lot of push in the rest of the country as well to gather resources for them. And frankly, a lot of criticism as to how it was handled, and some learning moments for how they should handle this kind of stuff in the future. They are expecting more rain actually within the next couple of weeks. Like this event is something that happens annually. It just was that this year it was at a level that has been unprecedented, and it's tough. But natural disaster is definitely a prevalent part of the way that we live, and is something that we need to take into account when designing our cities and trying to find better ways to create surfaces that are more absorbent and resilient, to just lump it all in one thing.
Yeah, and it's very analogous to the situation that Joe Minicozy and what they're going through there in Asheville, North Carolina. Also kind of brings up one of the common themes that we have here on the channel of, cities and regions and countries that are moving with much more of a sense of urgency of dealing with global warming, and trying to appreciate the fact that, we need to start really rethinking our dependence on automobiles and that contribution that we are all having to, this challenge that we have created at this point, and whether we can reverse any of this. And so certainly in the European Union, they are working much more deliberately and intentionally, towards making some of these. So I'm sure that you noticed that. And of course, as we are recording this here on the 12th of November, we've got COP29 kicking off right now and having many of those discussions right now. To close us out, is there anything in particular that we haven't mentioned that you want to make sure to leave the audience with?
Well, I guess to finish some comments on that, even I think environmentalism can come across sometimes as very just green, right? And maybe surface level, like depending on what side of what your perspective is on that. People are for it and want to dive in, and others are maybe more hesitant. And I just want to touch that from a financial perspective. There have been analyses done that show that planting a tree in a city, like I think this was done in New York City, where for every dollar invested into a tree, there was $5 of return because of it being something that provides shade to the city. It helps with stormwater management, and I'm forgetting the word, ingests CO2, right? It's carbon sequestration. Like there's so many benefits on a financial level as well for our cities and what we're doing there if we think about it. So I'm working on developing that pillar as well. Right now, I'm definitely focused more on the social and financial, but I definitely think that there's a way to combine all three. I think that those three are the three pillars of sustainability that we need to think about in terms of creating stable and resilient places long term. And I don't think that's something to be solved overnight. It's a forever challenge. But I appreciate you having me on. This was an awesome conversation, and I hope we can speak again in more in depth at some point.
Yeah, no, I look forward to that. And I look forward to meeting you in person, whether that's here in North America or over there in Europe. Rachel Leonardo, it has been such a pleasure having you here on the Active Towns podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Hey, thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Rachel Leonardo. And if you did, please, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and share it with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, be honored to have you subscribe to the channel. Just click on that subscription button down below and ring that notifications bell. And if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. It's easy to do. Just navigate over to activetowns.org, click on the support tab at the top of the page, and there's several different options, including becoming a Patreon supporter. Hey, patrons do get early and ad-free access to all my video content, and hey, every little bit helps, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you once again for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, this is John signing off by wishing you much activity, health, and happiness. Cheers. And again, sending a huge thank you out to all my Active Towns ambassadors supporting the channel on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Thanks, as well as making contributions to the nonprofit and purchasing things from the Active Towns store. Every little bit adds up, and it's much appreciated. Thank you all so much.